So good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another fantastic event brought to you by Girls on Track UK and Motorsport UK. I hope you are all doing well today. I'm Ariana Bravo and I will be your host for this evening. I currently co-host the Driven by Diversity podcast, which you can find on all the usual streaming platforms. And you may also recognize me from the recent Meet the Women of Formula One series. If you missed any of those sessions, or if you haven't watched any of them, I highly recommend that after this evening's session, you head over to Motorsport UK's website and YouTube, and you can find all of the information surrounding them, and you can catch up on any that you might have missed. Now, through tonight's session, if you have any questions whatsoever for our guests, please use the Q&A function. I will do all that I can to get through as many questions as possible before we wind things up for tonight. But let's just get straight into it. Let's not waste too much time talking about myself. We are joined by two wonderful ladies this evening. We have Helen Mirley, who is an Automotive Consulting Manager at Deloitte. Hello, Helen. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. Really pleased to be here.
Good. We're glad to have you. And Helen is also a member of the Women at the Wheel community, which we will be hearing all about later in the conversation. And we're also joined by McKenzie, who is the founder and CEO of Dial Global. Layla, thank you for joining us. How is your day going?
It's better for being here. Thank you so much for having me. And it's great to be joined by yourself and Helen.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. We're glad that you have joined us as well. So let's get straight into it, ladies. So Helen, starting with you, can you tell us about what your role is as an automotive consulting manager? Tell us what you're doing in the day-to-day.
Absolutely. So for those who aren't aware, I work at Deloitte, one of the big four consulting firms, and I've been there for nearly 2 years now. My actual consulting services are around automotive. And within the kind of day job there, I spend a lot of time with some of the big automotive manufacturers, helping them work through various different transformational issues that they're facing in the current climate. So be it Brexit, be it COVID, actually be it the change to electric, and all sorts of things that are actually going on with this industry at this point in time. I'm there to support with some of the decision making and some of the programs that businesses are putting in place to be prepared for the change that's coming.
Very interesting. It must be fascinating being on the inside as such, helping them out from the internal side of things. Can you also tell us about Women at the Wheel and what Women at the Wheel is and what you guys do, what the aim is?
Yeah, so interestingly, Women at the Wheel is run by Deloitte. I think we're around 5 years old now. I may get a slap on the wrist for getting the age wrong. But essentially that was set up by a director at Deloitte called Sarah Noble. So she founded that. And I actually joined Deloitte after finding Women at the Wheel. So I worked for an automotive manufacturer, Jaguar Land Rover, and attended one of the Women at the Wheel events, and then wound up with the business through that. But Women at the Wheel, in essence, is about trying to find a collaborative, supportive network for women who work in automotive or wish to work in automotive, basically giving them opportunities to sit through coaching, get to know other people and peers who might well work within the same businesses, within different functions, or work within different businesses within the landscape, and just really be a place of empowerment and support for females who are potentially looking to get to the top of their field, or may well just be looking for how they can lead within their own kind of influence, as it were. So we're involved with putting on a series of events and all sorts of networking opportunities to really bring people together.
That sounds brilliant, and I love initiatives like that, which obviously is why I'm involved with Girls on Track UK as well. And it's great to see things like that being pulled together and open to the wider community, because we need it, and it's nice to be able to talk to like-minded individuals, and like you said, events and things like that is a great way to network with one another. Layla, let's move over to you. Can you tell us about Dial Global, what the organization does, why you founded it, and why it's important to you?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Ariana. So Dial Global stands for Diverse, Inclusive, Aspirational Leaders. And I mean, I guess the business was founded by me actually literally just under 2 years ago. So we've grown pretty rapidly over the last couple of years. Diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity is something which is it's really personal to me, in particular intersectionality. I have a background in exec search, and I spent many years in the corporate boardrooms of organizations in the UK and beyond, on occasion, as well, working with international companies, and noticed that there was a significant lack of diversity, not just by way of gender, but by way of many different other aspects. And I guess I actually applied to many of the corporate organizations for which I now serve, funnily enough, within DAR Global, which is a peculiar kind of sequence of events almost. And yeah, I mean, I suppose the business was founded out of this kind of this unwavering desire to want to make genuine sustainable change in the world of corporate organizations and beyond. My background is such that I'm a Chinese female. Perhaps that part is obvious, but I was adopted by white British parents. As well, back in Hong Kong, when Hong Kong was a British colony, they went over to Hong Kong. My mum worked for the NHS. My dad worked for an entrepreneur called Mr. Mock, actually. And we came to the UK, went to international schools, came to the UK at the age of 6 and 4. My baby brother, he's actually not that small. He's 2 years younger than me, is also Chinese. Mum and dad are both white British. So we grew up in kind of in Harrogate, actually, in North Yorkshire, very middle class kind of white school. There was no other Chinese children in the school, so I think we're probably quite aware of being different. And I guess that, amongst other things, the fact that I am dyslexic, suffer with mental health and anxiety issues, have done for many years, have taken antidepressants for many years, that, as well as feeling very culturally British as well, as opposed to Chinese, even though my other half, who Helen may know, actually, who works at Jaguar Land Rover, Costa Peter Dellis, he's a middle-aged white guy, and I say this to him, but he speaks fluent Mandarin, which shocks people if we go into a Chinese restaurant when I can't speak a word of it, and he can. But I guess, with that little example, I hope to demonstrate that actually there's lots and lots of different facets that make up diversity, in inverted commas. And that's really what DIAL is all about. It stands for diverse, inclusive, aspirational leaders, and it's about moving the dial, excuse the pun, in the right direction when it comes to all of these different kind of eclectic facets of diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity. And our hope really is to be able to achieve this in the boardrooms of some of the largest organizations and beyond, and make sure that we impact those girls, women, others from various other communities that wouldn't necessarily have been given that opportunity. We give them a platform, we give them a chance to really showcase the great talent and the skills that they have, because right now there is just not enough diversity in corporate organizations, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's really fascinating hearing about your story, actually. I wasn't aware of that. And I'm looking forward to delving into the point you touched on about intersectionality later on in the conversation, because I feel like that side of things is really interesting. And I think also the points that you touched on about it not just being gender, race, your mental health, LGBTQ+, all of those areas are things that we should discuss, and hopefully will help our listeners and make them realize that, there's a lot more people out there that have a similar sort of journey to you, and you are more than capable. It's not something that should be a hindrance at all. But before we get to that, let's hear a bit more about how you both got to where you are today. So you've both mentioned that you worked at Jaguar Land Rover, but can you talk us through your careers or your journeys up to the point that you're at now? So Helen, we'll go back to you first. Can you talk us through to how you got into the automotive world?
Yes, absolutely. So interestingly, didn't start out in automotive when I graduated from university, even though I knew I wanted to go into automotive. I kind of took a bit of a backward route where I think I graduated in 2008, so smack bang into a recession, and it was very, very difficult. I remember applying to lots of things and it felt like I was climbing a mountain trying to get a job. But there was a small agency in Birmingham called Wave Communications that actually took me on, and had a whale of a time working with multiple different clients from across all sorts of industries. And really, it was a kind of a marketing background, full service communications, and I was very much a marketing individual and had done a marketing degree, but knew I wanted to go into automotive. Because I really loved the appeal of, people, the onus people put on buying vehicles. So I wasn't necessarily a petrol head, but it was very much people drive their cars and like to think it says something about them, and it's kind of an extension of their own personality. So really wanted to get into kind of the branding and marketing of that as a piece. And I remember looking for jobs, nothing was coming up, but eventually I took a call for a role as assistant brand manager at Goodyear Dunlop. And I thought, you know what, it's automotive, it's tyres, but it's a foot in the door and I'm going to go for it. And spent a good couple of years there, kind of at the point at which they brought the Goodyear blimp back to the UK. I'm also a massive Wolves fan, and for anyone who follows anything about football history and nostalgia, Goodyear were shirt sponsors of Wolves. So for me, it also had like a close place to my heart because it's some of our best kits over time. But yeah, so got involved with Goodyear and had a great time working for the company. Was so insightful, just understanding the tyre industry and how the infrastructure worked and how it actually fed the major automotive manufacturers. But during that time, had really kept my eye on what Jaguar Land Rover were doing, because they were going through quite a boom phase. Took me into 2012, and they were just flying. And an opportunity came up there for me to go and be interestingly, retail marketing manager. And I interviewed for it and didn't get it. And I was absolutely gutted. And they phoned me back and said, you haven't got this, but we've got another opportunity, which is, a bit of a step down at that point in time. But I just wanted to get in. So I was like, I'll take it, I'll do it. So I was a CRM marketing specialist, did about 18 months of that, and then moved over into the global headquarters where I worked in product marketing management. And as I got closer to how they engineer and manufacture the product, I started to realize that actually maybe marketing wasn't quite where I wanted to be. I was really quite interested in the whole end-to-end value chain piece, and from conception through to customers driving JLR cars. And so kind of really, with that being the case, ended up going into a launch management role where I oversaw all of the vehicle launches for a 4-year model period, let's say, at any given time, across the globe. So it was quite a big role, and it was quite, again, insightful, and taking what I'd learned with how they made and manufactured the car to actually how they then got it out to its markets, and then how it was launched in those markets. And it was at that point I was like, right, I'm going to go and join a women's group outside of Jaguar Land Rover, because for all of the opportunities that JLR have set me up with, and they're a fabulous company, and I've got many friends who still work there today, I kind of felt like I wanted something a little bit additional to that. I was seeking a sort of peer network who were like-minded in that they wanted to grow within that space, but it's very male dominated. So it didn't quite have the same feel to go chat to my male colleagues about my progression as it did finding women with the same kind of mentality. And I ended up on Google, and that's when I found Women at the Wheel. And I thought, this is completely what I want to be part of. and went to one of their events where we had a coaching event, and with a lady called Sally Fisher, who does some of our events, and she's fabulous. But essentially, that's where I met Sarah, and she's a role model to me today, even working with her. But at the time, I remembered being in awe of Deloitte and what they were doing, and knowing that they suddenly had this automotive arm to them. And I came away and I ended up looking on the job site, and I found something in supply chain. And I remembered thinking, I'm going to phone Sarah, and I'm going to reach out to Sarah and ask if I can talk to her about this role. And she took my call, and we went through it, and she said, brilliant, you'll just have to tell me a bit more about why supply chain. And I ended up in the conversation about the wider value chain and the whole transformation that was happening within automotive. And then a very rigorous interview process later, I wound up at Deloitte. And since then, I've just, it's been fantastic, because for everything I've learned at Jaguar Land Rover, the project pace moves a bit quicker because you're constantly moving around on different clients.
Yeah.
And I've had the opportunity to work with some automotives and OEMs where basically I am seeing their problems play out, sometimes very similar to Jaguar Land Rover, sometimes very, very different. And it's just, I thrive on getting that level of insight and understanding how these businesses work. So that's kind of been me in a nutshell to where I am today. And I'm still obviously incredibly involved with Women at the Wheel, because it spoke to me on a personal level, and I really love to see kind of how it also speaks to other people in a similar way when they come to our events.
That's really interesting, your journey to where you are now, actually, and the fact that it started more the marketing side of things, but it's led you into the consulting side. That's very interesting, because I know that often some of the ladies in the Girls on Track community can be a bit thrown off if they can't get their foot into the opportunity that they absolutely want straight off the bat. But sometimes it is about, navigating round to find your way in. And like you said, getting your foot in the door, and then it's a lot easier to move around once you're actually in. So that's a useful bit of advice there. Layla, we will come over to you now. You said that Dial obviously only started a couple of years ago, and you mentioned that you worked at Jaguar Land Rover. So can you talk to us a bit more about your career and background?
It was actually, it's my husband who works at Jaguar Land Rover. Oh, right. Actually, no, don't worry about it at all. And I mean, I have to say, first of all, yourself and Helen has got some amazing corporate experience. And I can echo what was said about Sarah Noble, who I've had the fortunate opportunity to get to know recently. Quite well, and she's going on a podcast actually very soon, which will be brilliant. I have not had a corporate career at all. I get to see across lots of different industries, and related, I suppose, to motorsport in particular. We do summits, we do various workshops. We're a community of generally corporate organizations, but they're across lots of different areas. Looking at motorsport and automotive in particular as one industry, it is one where there is a significant lack of gender diversity. No surprise, I'm sure, to many of you. But I do know a lot of really fantastic women who work within the motorsport, the automotive, the manufacturing, the STEM type communities. Just recently at our last Dial Global Summit, and we had Chloe Target Adams, whom I think has spoken here before, who chaired one of our panels, which is around achieving greater diversity. We had CEOs from Alpha Financial through to the CEO of Auto Trader, Nathan Coe, who is speaking, and various others. We've dealt with the likes of Bentley, whom I believe you work with as well, Astrid Fontaine, who sits on the board, Inspirational Women, and other diverse individuals. But for me, I've never worked in a corporate. never in my life, ever. But I do gaze, probably with rose-tinted spectacles, at those who work in corporates, like Helen, like my husband who works at Jaguar Land Rover. I always wished that I could work for one of those corporates, and I wish that there was an opportunity for me. So I guess the experience that I've had in specific with automotive has been more from a peripheral point of view. And so it's really kind of more, how can I, with the organization, support and champion those, in particular, girls and women and other diverse individuals, get the opportunities in which they seek within these organizations, really. So it's more from that perspective. I actually applied back when, and I should say, I mean, I didn't do bad at university. I got a first class honours. I got the highest mark in my graduating year. I applied for all of the management consultancies under the sun. I applied for all the corporates under the sun, and I couldn't get a job in any of them. And it hit me like a ton of bricks, because I thought I wasn't good enough. I thought that I wasn't good enough to have a job in one of these shiny corporates, actually. So I ended up going to work for myself, actually, for many years. I mean, I did some promotional work, which I was telling Jenny about the other day, actually, for Pirelli, amongst other automotive firms. Automotive type motorsport organizations, but it certainly wasn't from a corporate point of view. It is more from being a grid girl point of view, which I don't know whether is necessarily a good thing to admit on here, but I will do, simply because I think it demonstrates to a degree how far we have come and how far we need to seek to go, because women and girls are not simply objects. They are intelligent beings that deserve the same treatment and equality as others. If I'm very candid about it, and I hope it's okay me being so on this forum, I thought that that was all I was good for. To be honest, that's all I thought I was good for. I ended up working in recruitment. I worked in search. I built my own pretty successful exec search business just before meeting my husband, who works at Jaguar Land Rover now. And yeah, I mean, I failed multiple times before I got to doing what I do right now, which, you know, as I say, is a peculiar sequence of events, really, because I got the highest mark in my graduating year, yet I couldn't, for the life of me, get a job at any of the corporate organizations. And I would have loved to work in motorsport. I would have loved to work in automotive. I would have loved to work for a big management consultancy firm. But I think my time has now passed at the ripe old age of 34. For me, it's now about how can I help change the face of organizations and corporations, to have them understand that actually, you know, girls, women, other minority individuals deserve the equal opportunity that others have. And that is not, you know, that is not just equality. That is about equity. And equity is about understanding that we all start from different places in life. You know, I look at the background that I have. I look at the fact that I was afforded the opportunity to go to university. There's so many other people were not afforded the opportunity to go to university, or to have a head start as I did in many respects in life. Therefore, what can we do to truly level the playing field and give opportunity to those, to girls, to women, to minorities, to those from different communities, so they know that actually there's people that look like Helen, say, look like yourself, look like Jenny, who have made it to a position of leadership within a wonderful organization, that have had inspirational careers, basically, and that other people, other women, girls, feel that they can get to that place. Because I tell you, when I was in going for all these interviews, and when I was even at school, there was no one that looked or sounded anything like me. I just think I thought I was kind of white at the time. I didn't kind of realize to a certain extent, until I actually saw truly what the corporate organizations in their boardrooms look like. And I don't say this to be negative or try to, you know, kind of be negative at all, really. But I say this because it's the truth. The higher up you go within organizations, the less and less there is by way of diversity, inclusion, and all the other facets of diversity and what they make up. And, you know, really it's up to us as women supporting other women to help pave the way for future generations of leaders. You know, I've done a fair bit of, you know, I've done some charity work. I worked for the Samaritans for 3 years. I did do before COVID, spoke quite a lot for a charity called Working Options, which a friend of mine runs. And it's about kind of speaking in schools in underprivileged areas. And, you know, I remember doing one particular session and one of the girls came up to me afterwards and said, you know, I don't see anyone that looks like me in any of these positions. And it broke my heart. It broke my heart because I thought, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
You know, it's not for every, like, not, you know, not, I'm not saying, sorry, I'm a bit dyslexic as well. Not everyone who works in, you know, there's always got to be a first. In the case of, say, Helen, in the case of, you know, Women at the Wheel with Sarah Noble being the first to set that up, there's always going to be firsts and seconds and thirds. And that's always kind of a scary place to be, because you're paving the way where, you know, often other people haven't gone before. But it's really up to us now to, you know, be the change that we, you know, we want to truly see, and for women to support other women to get to where we want other women with talent to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And that point that you touched on there about not being able to see yourself in the industries or jobs that you might be interested in is a massive one that comes up over and over again, especially within the motorsport industry. It's something that we hear repeatedly, and it can act as a barrier because you question whether you're welcome in that environment. And some people are confident enough in themselves to go and pave the way, as you've said, but other people aren't, and some people don't want to be the first to do it, maybe. So it is a really tricky one to navigate. We did actually get a question that was sent in, and I can see questions coming in as well, so please continue sending them. I'm not ignoring them. I will get through to them as the conversation goes on. But we did have one sent in advance of today, and it was, what is your advice on how to approach career progression and development as a female within the workspace? And I think that's a really good question for both of you, considering we've got Helen, who's on the corporate side, and Layla, given how much you've seen across different organizations as well. So Helen, do you want to take that first? What would your advice be on how to approach career progression and development?
So I think it's a couple of things. And the reality is, if I've listened to myself talk through my journey, and I thought, God, you tried to really punch down some doors and do some quite scary things in the, you know, I picked up the phone and made a phone call to someone who I'd only met at an event one time previously, and started talking to her about a job that didn't look on paper like it was a direct template of what I was doing there and then. And I think I've had the best advice I was given or read once upon a time was around, you know, the difference between men and women is that, and this is generalizing, but men will look at a job spec and say, I can't do those things, but I will get there, so I'm going to go for that role. Whereas a woman will go for it and say, can't do that, I can't do that, I can't do that, therefore it's off the table for me. And I think it's, some of it's about the having a conversation with yourself to say, yes, I can, and put yourself out there, because the more you put yourself out there, you will meet like-minded people who want to help push you up. And I think that then leads me on to kind of the other thing I have, specifically from, you know, the whole female side of the workplace. I can name some fantastic male mentors, but specifically I've got some really great female mentors who I have reached out to, and they've now become personal friends to me, but they've also opened doors for me. At Jaguar Land Rover, there was one female who, I won't name her because it'll probably embarrass her a little bit, but she's since gone on to work at Lotus. And another female who, actually, the reason I am sat here in this virtual room this evening and know Layla and know Jenny and know about everything that everyone's doing is because she connected me into the network. And these are people where I recognise that they're good at what they do, and you want to bottle it and you want to take a little bit of it. So, you know, you approach them about things that you're encountering and the fact that they're a future role model for you, and ask for that advice. And I think as much as they are brilliant friends to me, they've also sort of become unofficial life mentors. So I think I would encourage definitely to step out of your comfort zone a little bit and challenge yourself on the things you think you can and can't do. And the worst someone could do is say no. And then the second thing is definitely that find your role models and be brave and approach them, because 9 times or 10 times out of 10, I've found them more than happy to pay their own advice forward.
Yeah, I echo that so strongly. We've heard time and time again, especially through the Meet the Women of Formula One series that we did, the importance of networking, and especially within an industry such as motorsport. It is a small industry, and a lot of people, everyone knows everyone through some degree of separation. So as long as you can get your foot in there and start making some of those relationships, you will so quickly find how many other doors open along the way. And that's something that I found myself, just by talking to a few people. Suddenly the vast majority of people within the industry are a little bit closer. I feel like they're not actually that separated from me, and I could probably drop them an email or a message or ask someone to do an intro, and it all just flows from there. So you do have to bite the bullet with that first contact, though. It's not always easy, especially if you're the outsider as such. And I'm not somebody, despite the fact that I'm very comfortable and confident speaking and presenting, I'm not somebody that is like a natural networker. It's not something that comes entirely naturally to me. So it is something that I have to sort of force myself to do. I have to force myself out of the comfort zone. But that's when the opportunities come. I mean, I forced myself out of the comfort zone, and now I'm able to do brilliant hosting things like this, even though it is something that wasn't directly in my eyesight when I first started off on this journey into motorsport. But by talking to people and by networking, here we are today. And also the other important point on that is, I'd say, the importance of meaningful relationships. As you said, it's not just the networking and making the contact, it's actually building and taking a little bit from those people that you can learn and pocket, and giving as well. It's a two-way thing. Everyone can learn from one another. And the more meaningful relationships they are, the more likely you are to then form lasting relationships that grow into something else and that open the doors along the journey. Layla, what would you say on that? Because obviously you've had oversight across different organizations in motorsport, outside of motorsport. So I'm sure that you've been able to sort of see some best practices as such, and what really helps ladies excel in their careers versus maybe some of the barriers that they commonly feel that they face, or some of the challenges that they encounter. So what would you say would be some of the more encouraging things that people could adopt, and things to help them really progress through their career?
Well, I mean, first of all, I would absolutely echo what Helen has said when it comes to finding female mentors. And actually, do you know what? They don't always need to be women. Some of the best mentors and individuals who have given me those opportunities have been men and women as well. But I think, first of all, kind of, finding those role models. I know it might sound a little cheesy, but actually finding role models and what we often call at Dial real models makes a real difference. You would be surprised who would say yes to having a brief conversation about something, whether it be career advice, whether it be a chat, whether it be a virtual coffee. I love that Helen told a story about reaching out to Sarah and just having a conversation. That is, that's real natural networking. I know you say, Ariana, you kind of, you almost have to force yourself sometimes to do it. I've been the same. Sometimes it is putting yourself slightly out of that comfort zone because it doesn't feel massively comfortable always, reaching out to people that you don't know, or people that maybe even you think you know from whether it's social media or you've heard them speak or something like that. The worst that can happen is that they say no. And actually, most of the time, the great thing is they often say yes. And those are often, can be lifelong relationships with people that you have, that I'm not saying you always strive to necessarily be like them, but I think you can learn from. I think it's really key and it's critical that you surround yourself by people who have a positive mindset, who are going to be encouraging you. I think on the challenges side of things, and we've probably all done it, right, is we've ended up accidentally surrounding ourselves with people who don't perhaps have such a positive mindset. I think sticking around those that, wherever possible, have got your best interests at heart, and people that you aspire to be like. There's someone who I well, actually, Helen's probably alluded to one of these people who's a very, very dear friend. She is someone that I'm sure will always be a friend. You can pick up the phone, you can have a chat, that you could be talking about business, you could be talking about just general life stuff, and she'd be there to speak to. And these mentors, these life ambassadors, in inverted commas, come in all shapes and sizes and walks of life. But the ones certainly in the career side of things really champion your best interest. They're your cheerleaders that are kind of standing by the sidelines saying, come on, you can do it. Don't listen to the kind of the voice that a lot of us girls and women in particular have scientifically proven more imposter syndrome than others, and are far more likely to be saying, not sure you can do that, not sure whether you ought to be speaking up in this room that might happen to be full of guys, or whatever it is. Actually, what's the worst that can happen? So yeah, I think surrounding yourself by people, reaching out to people, even though it can be quite scary, it can be quite challenging, is key. One of my real kind of inspirations, actually, when I worked kind of purely in exec search, and I was doing pretty senior roles. I recruited the first female Asian Canadian lady into Sainsbury's, and the successor for the CPO role I recruited at the back end of last year, the first female onto the board of a fintech FTSE organization. I was really pleased about it at the time. But this woman, who is kind of one of the longest serving kind of life mentors, as it were, that I have had, would, in the exec search world, recruit some of the biggest CEOs in our country. And she's just been someone who I followed for possibly, oh my goodness, how long now, 7-8 years, something like that. And she'd always be there for me. I could WhatsApp her and give her a call and say, hey, I'm really upset about this, or can you help me with that? And she'd be there, and she would listen, and she would try her best to help and support. And she's not getting paid anything, she doesn't need to do it. My business interests over the years have been much smaller than where she is, but I aspired to be where she was. She was like a bit of a guiding light, I think, for me. And I think there's lots and lots of people like that you tend to meet along life's path, in business and your career and personal life, and those are the people that you kind of really want to hold close to you, because they're the ones that you want to listen to. Negative influence is never good, but influence is incredibly powerful. That's what I've learned. And so you've got to stick yourself around the right people, ideally.
Yeah, absolutely. You do have to be particular about the circle that you keep, because it makes such a difference to your progression and the path you take, even though sometimes you might not realize at the time. It does definitely make an impact. And I actually wanted to just quickly share something for people that are listening. So on the point of networking, a really useful example of that I actually experienced last year, I had made friends with Steph, who is the co-host of the Driven by Diversity podcast, and you may have seen hosting some of the Meet the Women of Formula One sessions. And she had ended up putting me in touch with Crofty, who is the commentator for Formula One. Probably a lot of people on the call will be familiar with him because he commentates all of the races. And through him, he was happy to just give me a call one day and chat to me about what I wanted to do, even though he obviously had no clue who I was at this point in time. And he was happy to chat to me about what I want to do, what sort of opportunities I should pursue, who I should reach out to. He then gave me the email address of the then boss of Sky Sports Formula One, said drop him an email, he might be able to help you out. And it really just snowballs. And even though at the time, I remember literally, I can remember being like, oh my God, I'm about to speak to Crofty. Oh my God, this is the man I hear commentating all of the races. This is such a strange moment. Once you actually get on the phone, you realize that you're just speaking to another person who is actually not too different from you, happy to help, happy to hear your journey. So don't be too, you know, overwhelmed by reaching out to people who are in those positions that you dream of being, because often we almost idolize those positions when you're on the outside and you feel like, oh God, they're so different and important and I'm so nervous to speak to them. But you know, we're one in the same in the sense. And as you guys have both said, people are more often than not more than happy to talk to you and offer you a bit of advice, offer you a bit of guidance. So I do really recommend reaching out. And even if you don't get a response or you get a no, don't let that knock you back. That's just one thing. You don't know, that person might be really busy, they might be in the middle of something. It's nothing personal to you most of the time, unless you've done something outrageous, but it's often just, you know, they're caught up in the 101 things that we're all juggling. So don't let that put you off. Definitely keep knocking on those doors and eventually one of them will open, and that will hopefully be the start of something. I wanted to take one of the questions quickly that we've had in the Q&A. Layla, this was directed to you. It says, what is your take on implementation strategy for D&I in larger corporations? For instance, looking critically at diversity quotas that firms like PwC and other major corporations have spoken about. How do you see D&I shifting within industries like automotive? And how is Dial Global's approach different? So we'll swing it to you first. That's from Lauren. Thank you for your question. And then I'll jump to you, Helen, with a slightly different take on that.
Oh, that is like a massive question.
I know. I know. Take it away.
Okay, so where do I start? How do I basically think organisations can implement a diversity and inclusion strategy?
Yeah. Is it through quotas, or is it through a more a different approach? And what's your take on it from the Dial Global perspective?
Okay. So great question, huge question. Let me do my best. So we have just set up the McKenzie Dallas Foundation, actually, which is very exciting. And we're just ring fencing it at the moment as a charity. And it is to support diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity research. So last year, we did the McKenzie Dallas Packer review, and the last name Packer actually comes from Jali Packer. Jali Packer was a student that came from an underprivileged background, and we at Dial self-funded him to do some and support some research for us. We embarked on what was a pretty challenging feat of surveying 79 organisations. And in this, we looked at and are the first organisation in the world, as we know it, touch wood, that surveyed 10 holistic facets of diversity, inclusion, and belonging. So I suppose, why is what we're doing different? One, we're a mixture of not-for-profit and for-profit. The reason why we set up the McKenzie Dallas Foundation this year is because we want to separate completely our charitable and not-for-profit efforts versus our business and our commercial efforts, basically. But last year we did this pilot, 79 organizations. We looked at these 10 facets of diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity, which were gender, race and ethnicity, sexual orientation, disability, age and generation, parenthood, mental health, socioeconomic status, nationality, and then religion or belief. We've extended it on even further this year, but what we did is we basically cross-checked all the intersectionalities. So we took each of those different 10 facets of diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity. We partnered up with some of the leading charities, research organizations, institutions in order to co-create questions. So we co-created 3 to 5 questions on every single one of the 10 facets. So, for example, we partnered with the Centre for Aging Better on the Age and Generation facet. We partnered with the Sir John Parker Review on the ethnicity facet. We partnered with Stonewall on the LGBTQ+, which is now LGBTQ+ IA facet. We partnered with the Hampton-Alexander Review on the gender facet. We went all the way around the 10 facets. We cross-checked all the intersectionalities, because people like Stonewall were saying to the Hampton-Alexander Review, you can't have a box for other, basically. You can't have an other gender that's like non-binary, basically. So we cross-checked all of those. We ended up with 35 questions. We went to corporate organizations and said, fill this in, because this is for your CEOs -2, so that we could look at the makeup of all the different aspects that would appear by way of diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity in these 10 facets, within namely kind of boardrooms. And then we partnered with the UN Global Compact, because they've got 17 sustainable development goals, of which a number of them are related to diversity. So we cross-checked all of those as well. And then, and yeah, now this year, we are doing this on the Fortune 500 and the FTSE 500, and we're doing it properly. And I say properly, we did it properly last year, but we did it on a shoestring budget. Everyone said, oh, you can't do that. There's too many facets. And we said, right, well, fine, we're going to go do it ourselves then. So off we went, and we went and did it. And actually EY backed it in the end. And this year KPMG have already put their name in the hat and said they want to back it. So we have got individuals from, try not to mention, because Deloitte's amazing as well, amazing, and Women at the Wheel is amazing. We've got others from some of the other firms. You mentioned PwC specifically. I have to say I don't know PwC very, very well, but I do know some of the execs, like Sarah Churchman and whatnot, who sit on our review committee. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a long-winded answer, but basically the plan is that we put science behind data. And we aggregate this, so organizations have it's the first diagnostic, which is also free for everyone to participate in, corporate organizations to participate in, which allows them to look at where they sit on all of those 10 aspects of diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity, and then track progress. And that's an annual review now. So the McKenzie Delta Review will happen every single year in partnership with Ipsos Mori from now. And our ambition is to go UK. We're going to America this year with the Fortune 500, which we know is challenging, but also quite exciting. And then we want to take it further beyond that to other countries in the world, basically.
That's really interesting. And it sounds absolutely brilliant how you've pulled in all that expertise from the associated organizations or foundations, etc., that have the specialized knowledge as such on those diversity areas. That sounds very, very interesting and unique. And I'm glad that it's been successful and is continuing to be successful. Helen, we have a question from an anonymous person within the chat who asked, do you have any tips on how to start? What could be my first move after realizing I want to work in the automotive industry?
Oh, interesting question. I'm sure there's lots of interesting questions, and I'll keep saying that. So where do you start? I think the thing I would say is, I had my goal if I wanted to go work at Jaguar Land Rover at a point in time. And interestingly, at university, when I wanted to go automotive, I wanted it to be Jaguar Land Rover. I can still remember walking to school, and I was probably, I want to say 8 years old, and I saw a Range Rover drive past me, and I was like, I want that car. And that stuck with me. And then I decided I wanted to work at Jaguar Land Rover. So that's kind of, it was my goal. But that didn't happen for me immediately. And actually, it was very much the case that I had to go and do something entirely different and work on building up my kind of transferable skill set whilst keeping my eye on what was coming up. And I think back then I had no idea what I was doing in some respects. I just would be, I don't remember LinkedIn being that big a thing, and all of these social tools and abilities to network and get to know other people were in no way as wide and expansive as they are now. So I think the first thing to do would be, well, you've met me, find me on LinkedIn, drop me a note. You kind of take those sorts of opportunities where you you can put a name and a face to something and then ask that person more of their experience. And I'm sure, personally speaking, if we were having a conversation, I might be able to hear more about your background and give you some ideas on what I would specifically do. But I think the other thing is I just looked out, I use Google to go and find stuff I like. So I'm involved with Women at the Wheel. I'm actually also involved with Luminary Bakery, and I'm starting a mentoring course with their intake for this graduate year. And that is a social enterprise that's incredibly focused on diversity and inclusion for women who are from difficult backgrounds. So I am involved with that, but that was something else. I decided I wanted to try and get involved with something in a volunteering opportunity. So I was on Google looking up volunteering opportunities that were around women's equality. So I think that, the internet is your friend in that respect. You'll probably be able to find something that's a volunteering perspective that you can get involved with, that then starts to broaden your horizons, both from who you get to know in doing that, but also the topics you can speak to show that it's a real passion project for you. And then the people, you will meet people who will introduce you to people, and so on and so forth. So hopefully that answered that question.
Yes, that's a good answer. And I'm sure whoever it is will send you a message after this as well, asking for further help. So thank you for offering to help there. We have had another couple of questions, which I'm quickly just going to respond to. So we had a question from Brianna, who's asked any advice for somebody who wants to work in the motorsport industry, but does not want to attend university. Just quickly in response to that, I would say it depends what you want to do within the motorsport industry. Of course, if you're going into something like engineering or something more specialized, then you might need to attend university. And we also did have another question from someone asking about what types of mathematics courses to do in order to get into engineering. And I would say for questions like that, I really, really recommend you post them on the FIA Girls on Track UK page, because we have so many members who can respond and give you their take on it, give you their experiences and point you in the right direction. So really, really recommend you head over to the Facebook page after this and get your questions out there, because you'll have loads of responses who are much better placed than myself, because obviously I'm not in the engineering side of things. But I would say that university isn't essential for all the roles within the motorsport industry. There are plenty of roles that you can get into without a degree. So depends what you're interested in, but head over to the Girls on Track UK page and get your question out there. One of the other questions that we had that was sent in before today's event that I would think is a really good question, and I would like both of your responses on, is what keeps you motivated when you're stressed or under pressure within the work environment, I assume. So Helen, you go first. From the corporate side, what keeps you motivated when everything is going mental around you?
I think, interestingly, I'd be the first person to say I probably thrive under a bit of a pressured environment. So clearly consulting fits for that reason. So I definitely, I thrive in that, is the first point. But I think, generally speaking, I've watched situations play out, be it on projects, be it the development of the people I'm working with, and you have those small snippets of when something you win and you land a project on time, or a client's really happy, or someone you're actually coaching in their own career nails the presentation that you've been working with them to prep for. And I think it's just reflecting on those being the outcomes when you are in a moment of stress, and remembering that it's actually all for a common goal that you've set for yourself within your own career progression. So that's probably what keeps me going in those sorts of situations.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Those little glimmers remind you why it's all worth it and why you should persevere. Layla, what about you? What keeps you motivated when you're stressed and feeling a bit overwhelmed by everything that's happening at work?
Well, I think Helen gave a great answer. Mine is similar, I have to say. And I mean, I suppose what I would say, just to follow on from what Helen has said, is that it is so much it's so much easier to look at how far you have to go and get all beat up about it. You know, and I think sometimes we are our own worst critics. I know I am. I'm probably the person that's most tough on myself. I beat myself up all the time about having not done good enough. But actually, in reality, when you do take a step back, and it's hard to do that sometimes, when you do take a step back, it is reminding yourself or gazing down the mountain and going, hey, hang on a minute, look how far I've come. Look what I've achieved. And that's okay to do that. I think, you know, for whatever reason, us girls are not quite as good at doing that. You know, the guys are great at doing it. You're like, oh yeah, I've done this, I've done that, you know, I'm the best at this. You know, I think there's a lot to be said sometimes about modesty. However, I think we need to spend time celebrating the wins, you know, even the small ones, because they're big ones in reality a lot of the time. Before I came onto this webinar, I was thinking, oh my goodness, I need to do this, I need to do that. And even having this time right now and listening to and watching both of you on screen talk about, you know, what has happened, I find that inspiring. I find that inspiring, and it then makes me think as well about, oh, actually, what else has happened this week, which is good. You know, recently, I signed a contract, an exclusive contract with a talent agency. Sorry about that, that's the oven. I'm sure Costa will scuttle in a second. It sounds like dinner's ready. Sorry, it's the home working thing.
Don't worry.
What was I saying? Oh my God. Sorry. Oh God, it's... Anyway, what was it I was saying?
Contract.
Yes, I recently signed a contract with Champion Talent, which is a TV talent agency. It was completely unexpected. My chief marketing officer sent a little show reel thing that I'd done around talking about diversity and inclusion off to a talent agency, and then announced to the team that you know, she was really excited about seeing me. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is scary but kind of amazing. And you know, kind of talk about motorsport and such. And I was looking at some of the other presenters they have, like Tori Campbell, you know, who I recognize from doing a lot around you know, sports reporting, presenting, all that kind of stuff. And other faces that I recognize even from some of my childhood, like TV presenters. And I think, hey, do you know what, actually it is working. All the talking about diversity, inclusion, belonging, all the action, all the years, all the pounding the pavements, knocking on doors, people saying no, you know, it is actually starting to become worth it. So I think, you know, remembering the small things, remembering the things that happen, being proud of how far you have come, because everyone has come far. Even if it feels like little baby steps, or you're pushing up against a brick wall a lot of the time, actually, you know, you are making a difference. So I suppose what really motivates me is seeing and hearing stories of others, like both of you here, who are doing great things in the world, paving the way for other women, paving the way for other guys even. Actually, some guys who I'm sure haven't got to where you are in your careers. And I think that's inspiring. That is what makes me do what I do every day, because it is, you know, it's finding something that you're really, really passionate about and that you can make a difference in, that I think does, you know, does inspire that change. And so, yeah, for me, it's just continuing on with that journey, recognizing the wins, however small, however big they might be, and knowing that you're making a difference. Getting a letter after doing a podcast from someone saying they're inspired by whomever I was interviewing at that time, or, you know, enjoying the summits, or, you know, learning a pearl of wisdom from something that was said by someone that we're speaking to. Those are the moments where you think, you know what, it is absolutely worth it, even though it is, you know, tough and the chips are down a lot of the time. You know, look, you know, we're all human, aren't we? At the end of the day, no one's perfect. So yeah, I think just also being kind to yourself. I know people say that, and you see it splashed over the internet, oh, be kind to yourself and everything like that. And it's easy to let social media wash over you sometimes, but actually truly taking a moment to have kind of self-care and looking after yourself, it makes a big difference as well.
Yeah, absolutely crucial. Thank you both for those lovely insights. I feel like that was brilliant conversation, and nice point on the end there, Layla, about being so inspired by what you do. And I feel like that's when you know you are really doing the job or the role that's right for you, when the challenges and the more negative days are always able to be outweighed by the passion that you've got for what you're doing. And that ties in exactly with what you said as well, Helen. Those little glimmers make it all worth it still. We have reached the end of the hour, which has flown by, and I could have continued this conversation for much longer because there are so many other questions that I wanted to get to you guys, unfortunately. But I just want to say a huge thank you to both of you for joining us and for giving up your hours of your evenings to speak to everyone. And a huge thank you to everyone that's tuned in and everyone that's listened. I hope you have found it useful. As I said, please be sure to reach out to any of us if you have any other questions, any other follow-ups, and we will be sending out a follow-up email tomorrow, which will have a link to the Girls on Track UK Facebook page. It will include information on Women at the Wheel that Helen spoke about earlier, and also on Dial Global, so that you guys can get to know a bit more about what it is that the ladies we are talking to do, and you can find out lots more information. We're getting some thank yous in the chat as well. That's very sweet. You guys, thank you for joining us. And make sure to join the Girls on Track UK page. As I keep saying throughout all of this session, I really can't stress it enough. So many other like-minded individuals on the Facebook page, and you'll be able to keep up to date with any other events that we do like this. But that is all for this evening. So once again, thank you, Helen and Layla, for joining us. And thank you, everyone else. I hope you have a lovely evening.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks so much, Ariana. You've been a great host, and to Jenny and Helen, great panelist. Thanks all, and love to stay in touch as well. Do reach out, stay in touch on LinkedIn. I'm already thinking, I'm going to have to invite you both to be a guest on the podcast. You'd be brilliant, and Jenny as well. So yeah, thanks all, and have a great evening.